Today we're taking a further look at the Pierre-Luc Dubois Montreal Canadiens connection. Will we see a trade sooner than later? What are the odds? What could be involved? We'll analyze that. Plus, we're going to look at some trade rumors around the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Ottawa Senators and several signings as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about here today. First up, we get word that the New Jersey Devils have hired former Florida Panther head coach Andrew Brunette. He's heading to the Devils as an associate coach, so he'll basically be second in command, so to speak, with Lindy Ruff still at the helm in New Jersey. To me, I see Andrew Brunette as very likely being the next head coach for the New Jersey Devils. I think it's fair to say that Lindy Ruff is probably on a short leash. There was a lot of rumblings towards the end of last season that he might be let go and the Devils might go in a new direction with their head coaching position. That did not happen, I think, to a degree. We've seen a case of, like, even Jack Hughes spoke out saying how much he liked Lindy. I think there is a lot of players that are fond of his coaching, and that's kind of ultimately what helped keep him around. I do wonder, though, going into next year, if we'll have a bit of a short leash, or depending on how the Devils do. I think we're going to have to wait and see when New Jersey's offseason gets a little closer to wrapping up what this team looks like, what expectations are going to be. But ultimately, regardless of when that time comes, whether it be early this season, end of next season, and what have you, I think it's a pretty likely scenario that Brunette will ultimately replace Ruff when the time is right. But we will see where things go on that front. Lots of news and information from the 32 Thoughts podcast, the final one of the season from Elliotte Friedman and Jeff Merrick we're going to talk about today, most of which will come a little bit later in the video. But first up, I want to talk about something that he brought up near the end of the podcast, and that's tampering. Friedman mentioned that he wonders, based on what he's heard, if there could be some tampering accusations that are made, some formal complaints possibly being made. Could there be some investigations? Of course, we know that the NHL has changed the rules various times here on free agency and exactly how it works when it comes to talking to players. Once upon a time, there was a window, I can't remember the exact number of days, but there was a certain time frame leading into free agency where other teams and players could actually speak hypothetically about parameters of a potential contract. They couldn't make anything official, couldn't sign anything, of course, but they were allowed to basically do interviews and kind of feel each other out ahead of time, so that, you know, when we see free agency kick off, you would get a flood open of deals within the first hour because a lot of the legwork was already done. Players, especially that were interested in talking to a variety of teams, sometimes would even have like flights booked, and they'd fly all around the country or Canada, US, talking to teams, having all these meetings and, the week leading into it and kind of getting things lined up. We don't see that anymore. The last memorandum of understanding to extend the CBA did away with that time frame. But of course, leading into free agency this year, we knew probably at least anywhere from 2 to 3, 4, 5 days ahead. In some cases, maybe even slightly more than that. But, the week leading up to it, we'll say that there was a lot of deals that were discussed in the rumor mill that came exactly true. So that, I know we kind of joke about it in a sense, because you do kind of figure that tampering is not something that doesn't happen. I think it's fair to say it absolutely does exist. But here's the thing. I mean, a player may not speak to a general manager himself per se. Maybe his agent knows the GM and deals with them on a variety of things. They could give them information. Like, there's lots of ways to have information changed hands without, certain individuals actually connecting the dots. I don't know, but we'll see. He's not sure if it's going to be a case where the league opens investigations. Will they crack down on it? Will we see some change come from it? I'm not really sure, but ultimately he feels like there's a chance that there could be some formal complaints made and it could become a thing. Even if teams that are thinking that their players were tampered with and, other teams were speaking to them sooner than they should have been, I don't know that we're automatically going to get a formal complaint. But even if they don't, Friedman's made mention and he's heard of cases of the league checking things out when there was enough information made public that even if a team doesn't complain, they can still look into something to see if anything was taking place that it should have been. So I don't know if that's going to become a story, but Friedman's made it known that it's something that we should kind of keep our ears open about and be watchful for. It could become something, but it may not either. Now, lots of signings today as well. All kinds of them. Most of these are depth signings for the most part, but there's a couple of interesting ones here. First up, we've got the Vancouver Canucks have signed Christian Wolanin. He gets a one-way, two-way contract for a defenseman that's bounced around here a fair bit. Of course, Wolanin's been to 2 or 3 teams now. Ultimately was looked upon as being a guy who was going to make the NHL and be a regular for the Senators a while back after coming out of college hockey, and just could not keep it consistent, battled some injuries, and has just had a hard go since. We'll see if he can find a spot in Vancouver. I do think he'll probably spend more time in the minors, but he's a decent depth option for call-up if need be. Ottawa Senators have signed 2022 third-round pick Tomas Hamara to his ELC. Of course, he was at the recent Sens development camp that just wrapped up as well. So it looked like he had a good showing for a third rounder that was just drafted. It looked like he had some real solid potential, so he gets his ELC signed. The Seattle Kraken have signed John Hayden, another depth player who's been a decent, and I stress decent, but not great bottom six forward. He gets a two-way deal for 1 year. The American League contract, though, that part of this is going to be $750 at the NHL level, but $325 for the AHL. So that's a hefty income for that level. You don't see a lot of guys getting that. The Nashville Predators have also signed an ELC today, getting their first-round pick, Joakim Kemell from Finland. His 3-year ELC is now official. We saw a bunch of the higher picks get their contracts here just in the last 24 to 48 hours, and now there's a bunch more. Obviously, the Sabres have signed a slew of players, including their 3 first-round picks from the 2022 draft. Matthew Savoy, Noah Ostlund, and Yuri Kulich have all signed their entry-level deals as well. And the Sabres also were bringing back Lawrence Pilot, who's been playing over in the KHL for the past couple of seasons. They did retain his rights, and he signs a 1-year, 2-way deal for $750 at the NHL level. So we'll see if he can crack that squad or not. I think he's going to have a tough time because they've accumulated a lot of solid young D-men and prospects since he's gone. And plus with what else they have there for the few experienced players, I think he'll have a tough time, but at least he's back trying to make a go of it. The Columbus Blue Jackets have signed Nick Blankenburg. Of course, he was a college free agent signing near the end of last season. Fit in pretty well. Had a good showing on a brief amount of games at the end of the season, but he gets a 2-year deal, $825,000 per season, and it is a 1-way contract. So he'll be getting a spot there. Of course, he'll need waivers if not. The Flyers have started their RFA process, getting some guys signed. They get Morgan Frost looked after today. 1 year, $800,000. The Predators have signed free agent forward Zach Sanford. He's bounced around quite a bit now, but Sanford gets a 1-year deal at $850K. That is a 1-year deal as well. Of course, Sanford originally was a St. Louis Blue for the first number of years of his career. Gets traded to Ottawa in a Logan Brown trade. Didn't have the greatest showing there, was inconsistent, but he ended up getting traded to the Jets last year at the deadline, and now he's a Nashville Predator. So that's 3 teams since leaving the Blues, all in less than a year. So he's certainly been roaming around. We'll see what happens in Nashville if he can make a go of it. For sure, St. Louis has also signed Martin Ferk to a 1-year deal. It's a 2-way contract, though, $750 at the NHL level. He was in the Kings organization for quite a few years. Before that, he was in Detroit. A player, I don't understand why he doesn't get more of an NHL opportunity. The biggest signing of the day is the Maple Leafs have announced that they've signed forward Calle Jarnkrok. Now, this might not be a blockbuster signing by any means, but it's the biggest one today. Of course, things are starting to quiet down a little bit with a lot of deals already taken care of. There's still some decent names out there, though. I'm sure we're still going to get a few more that are going to be bigger deals than what we see here today. But the Jarnkrok deal is a 4-year contract for the new Leaf forward at $2.1 million. Of course, he came off a long-term deal in Nashville. Similar money. I think it was like a 6 or 7 year contract that he had extended with them way back. Of course, he went to the Calgary Flames at the deadline. Didn't have the greatest results there. Even though he had lots of friends on the team, there's all kinds of Swedish players that he was good friends with in Calgary. But it just didn't seem to be I don't know. It just didn't seem to work out for him there, in my opinion. But he should be a good fit in Toronto. Now, of course, this is a decent contract. There's only a couple of issues that arise from him, but obviously it's nothing that the Leafs wouldn't already know. And I'm sure that there's other work being done in the background here that we haven't heard about yet to kind of offset. But this Jarnkrok signing does a couple of things. It likely creates a scenario where we're going to basically see the Leafs are forced to make at least a trade or two. They have no more space to sign their RFAs, which include Rasmus Sandin on the blue line and for Pierre-Engvall. Now, of course, I don't know what exactly that kind of money that's to sign those players. You're probably looking at least 4, probably 4.5, maybe closer to 5. I know they got Timothy Liljegren for like around 1.4, 1.5 million. But Sandin apparently is looking for a deal closer to Adam Boqvist, who's making more than $2 million. So I think to get him signed, he's going to want closer to that kind of money. He doesn't have arb rights either, so it's something that could drag on. There's no timetable per se. And we also know that he has concerns about his spot in the lineup and where he stands that way on the depth chart. So I don't know about Sandin. Like if they're going to cost them more than $2 million for him. Engvall scored 15 goals last year, had I think it was about 35 points or something like that. So I mean, like he's likely going to get more than $2 million, and probably closer to 2.5 to 3 would be my guess. So you're looking at about $5, maybe a little bit better $1 million to get both of those players signed. So what's that mean? Well, you got to clear some space. Now, of course, they signed a bunch of other players yesterday that we talked about, some of which seemed a little confusing, but I think they'll all have their kind of purpose. They signed Victor Mete, they signed Jordy Ben, and to me, Jordy Ben is probably Jake Muzzin insurance. That's what I'm calling that, because he's a physical style defenseman. He can play. He's not as good as Muzzin. I don't think it's really all that close even, but he's a guy who can play a similar type of role if you need him to. But definitely a trade in Toronto has to happen, whether it be Jake Muzzin, Justin Hall, Alex Kerfoot. Like, one of those guys has to be moved. I honestly look at Jarnkrok as possibly being a Kerfoot replacement. He's that utility type kind of player who can play a variety of spots. So to me, obviously with Jarnkrok being a forward, they have an abundance of players now. Does this mean the final year of Alex Kerfoot at 3.5 becomes expendable, create some cap room, and then they could give that money, could be, to help look after some of the RFAs. Not going to completely get it done, but it's also rumored that they're likely going to move a defenseman, right? Between Muzzin and Hall, somebody's got to go. It's a crowded blue line, and they need the space. 1 year left of Justin Hall of $2 million would definitely be the easier move to make. But is that going to be it? Like, I think, I wonder if they'd rather move Muzzin. He does have trade protection. He has more term. He's got quite an injury history now. I don't know how easy that's going to be. I know there's lots of teams that probably like and respect how he plays, but they're going to have concerns, no doubt. So we'll see what happens, but ultimately the Leafs are going to have to make some moves here on the trade front after all these contracts from free agency are kicking in. Nazem Kadri, obviously unsigned so far. A lot of speculation that he's waiting for teams that are interested, that he would be interested in as well, to clear some space. One of those being Colorado, where he just get done winning a Stanley Cup and obviously, completing his contract. There's some that believe that they are working on making the space to make it happen, that maybe the market for Kadri might not have been as big and lucrative as some might have thought it out to be. And at this point, he's trying to figure things out. It's rumored that the Islanders could be in on him too, although I'm not entirely convinced that that's indeed the case, because I don't know that he's really the ideal player that they need. It could work, but I don't know that he's really the perfect scenario for the Islanders. To me, perfect fit would be to stay in Colorado if he can. He's probably not going to be able to get as much money, but at the end of the day, there's talk that maybe they could move Samuel Girard, which to me makes a lot of sense. Look at they were able to keep Josh Manson, who they get at the deadline, right? As much as Girard's a good young defenseman, lots to like there, but you already have Cale Makar, Devon Taves, arguably the top pair in hockey. You've got Bo Byram, who proved in the playoffs he's ready for top 4 duty. You just signed Josh Manson. You didn't sign Josh Manson to be your number 5 or 6 defenseman making $4 million. You still get Eric Johnson for another year. You've got Curtis McDermott. If you want some size and skill, you've got obviously Johnson, McDermott, lots of size and grit back there. You get Manson, you get some big D, you get some skilled D. And Taves and Makar play so much. Can you afford to lose Girard to make another part of your team really that much better? And I think the answer is yes. And I think there would be an excellent trade market for Jerard as well. I really do. I mean, he's a young, dynamic defenseman, great skater. I think he'd be a great help to a lot of teams. So I don't see there being any shortage of interest, and I would not be shocked at all if he is dealt here in coming days in order to have the Avalanche re-sign Kadri. So we'll see when that goes on. Another free agent I want to talk about a bit here is Klingberg, John Klingberg, not going back to Dallas. There is a connection to a couple of teams, and one of them being Ottawa, another one being Detroit. I do think the Red Wings are more likely in this scenario. They have more space. They have more of a long-term ability to service what he's looking for. If Ottawa was able to get this deal done, it would have to be short-term. But we know that the Ottawa Senators, as much as they've been busy, they're not done. They still are looking to get a top four right shot defenseman. And I know that there have been conversations around Klingberg's camp. But I just think, like I said, it would have to be probably less money than he wants and less term. So I don't really have a lot of confidence that's going to happen. And I'm not entirely convinced he's the absolute best available option. As much as he's a great defenseman, I just don't know that he's exactly what they need. They have lots of offense in the back end already from Thomas Chabot. Jake Sanderson, who's hoping to be a full-time defenseman this year, is very offensive as well. They get Eric Brandstrom for your second power play. They don't need another offensive guy. He's not going to get the offensive ice time to really maximize. And getting a short-term deal for Klingberg in Ottawa, I think is going to push his numbers down. It would be bad for his career. As much as it'd be good for Ottawa, I don't think it'd be good for Klingberg. So to me, the other name that's been mentioned a lot in Ottawa is John Marino. We know the Penguins are 100% actively trying to shop and move at least one, maybe even two defensemen. Marino makes a lot of sense. New assistant general manager in Ottawa, Ryan Bowness, just came from Pittsburgh. Extremely familiar with a lot of their players. Ryan Bowness, I think, is doing a terrific job as well. Big part of their new vision here and the new success they were able to have here in the past couple of weeks with all the moves we've seen. Pierre Dorian's obviously getting a lot of the credit, but I think Ryan Bowness has been an absolutely phenomenal addition there, helping him out. So look for Nikita Zaitsev to be a contract dump for the Senators. I don't expect that to happen, though, until they get another defenseman figured out. So whether it be Marino or somebody else, I think they have a deal lined up in the back pocket, but they don't want to execute it until they find his replacement. So we'll see where that goes. But the summer of Pierre will continue with Dorian making additional moves, I have no doubt. Not sure when we're going to expect that, though. And lastly, on Dubois in Montreal, there's more information again today. More suggestions that there was actually a deal discussed at the NHL draft, and it was actually hard to say how close, but it goes to show you that the Habs are indeed trying to make this happen. I was listening to a new podcast with Tony Marinaro. He interviewed one of the Winnipeg top beat writers, Murat Atash, and he kind of said the same thing, what was being talked about at the draft. Essentially, we all know now 100% based on comments between Ken Hughes and Pat Brisson, who represents Dubois, that there's no doubt that this is very much a slam dunk gonna happen. It seems like it's inevitable. At least that's my opinion right now, that Dubois will end up at Montreal. It's just a matter of when. Will it be a trade this year? Will it be a trade next year? Will it be when he's a UFA? It seems like the new regime in Montreal, just like the old regime, extremely interested in this player. And, they want him, he wants them, so they're bound to likely make it happen. But here's the problem, is it sounds like the offer that Montreal talked to with the Jets, I believe, was being discussed before they pulled the trigger on getting Kirby Dach. I believe that number 13 overall pick that they acquired in the Romanov trade was on the table in that package. I think there was at least two to three other possibilities of players that were included in that. I think maybe a Josh Anderson, perhaps a Christian Dvorak. There could have been a defenseman, a young defenseman as well. Obviously, they have plenty of them. But after trading Romanov, I think that's probably, that's a speculation. That guys like Dvorak and Anderson in his first rounder is likely what was being offered. And for Kevin Cheveldayoff and the Winnipeg Jets, that didn't appear to be good enough. I don't think that's really what they want. For starters, they absolutely need a center back, and I don't think Christian Dvorak is the quality center that they're looking for. They need somebody who can be a more consistent, higher point producing top six center. And they were hoping that was going to be Dubois when they acquired him, trading Patrick Laine. This is kind of backfiring on him here, that he absolutely will not sign long-term. But essentially, he's told the Winnipeg Jets that without any question here, he will not sign long-term in Winnipeg. It's not happening. that he will make free agency as quickly as possible unless he'll get to Montreal. Apparently, Dubois himself was at the draft and had lots of family with him, and it sounds like they were under the impression that it was really close to happening, that he was going to get traded to Montreal, and then it sounds like he was willing to sign a long-term extension with them should that happen. The deal is not to Cheveldayoff's liking. Now, how much harder and further Hughes and the Habs will continue to push to try to get this done, I don't know. They may put it on the back burner because they know they can get him at some point as a UFA here in 2 years. Do they want to wait that long? I really do worry about how Dubois will handle things in Winnipeg once he gets there, if he's still there in training camp. Montreal might have to get to the point that they include Kirby Dach in the deal, to be honest, if they want to make it happen before they can sign him for free. Now, obviously, they're not going to trade Nick Suzuki, but they need a top 6 center back, or at least a good prospect top 6 center, something. And Suzuki is not going to be dealt. That would make no sense for Montreal. They want to run with Suzuki, Dubois, and possibly Dach. But Dach might be a trade piece to go to Winnipeg now for that deal. If they really want to make it happen, if they put Dach in there and maybe a first rounder next year, then we're talking. I don't know Montreal's going to want to do that, though. That's the problem. That's why I'm really skeptical that we're going to see a deal happen. But I do think as well that Cheveldayoff and the Jets are going to know that the longer they wait, the lower his value is going to be, because he's not going to sign. And he's talking about free agency and all that. Like, I don't know. We'll see what happens, but it seems inevitable that he will end up in Montreal sooner than later. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.